and I looked at my watch. I was 5 minutes into the class, and there was still 55 minutes left. And there were two very distinct factions at first. Women went over here and did aerobics. Men went and lifted weights. George, I don't want you to lose what you've built over these years. I have a building. Come and have a look at the building and tell me what you think.
My guest today on the red couch, I have the honor of having Mr. George Griffith, who is well known to all Barbadians as a man who has been an innovator and a trendsetter in creating gyms in Barbados. Now, George, I want to just do a little historical thing. I don't know when gyms started to become sort of like gyms as we understand them, like Surfside, started to become a reality in Barbados. Now, my memory takes me back to the Universal Gym in Hastings. That was the first big gym. Yes, there were always the backyard gyms with the guys with the weights and heavy breathing and screaming and shouting and and so on, right? But now the sophistication of the gym, the treadmill, the air conditioning. I remember Universal Studios, and then I remember World Gym. And somewhere in there, I also remember Surfside down behind the Hilton, close to the lighthouse.
Correct.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah. So was Universal more or less like the first big gym of its kind? I don't recall any before that.
It's the first in my memory. I mean, I think I went to Universal as a 15-year-old boy who was on the national rugby team. So the national rugby team used to do a couple classes a week at Universal, and I was always very active. I was, what is now knapsack. I ran from knapsack, BSAC, all the way through, played basketball, played pretty much every sport.
Yeah.
And that was my introduction to Universal, working out there with the national rugby team. Subsequently, I went off to England on an academic scholarship, funny enough, and I studied electrical engineering.
Really?
Yeah, but because I was so active with sports and fitness and so on, I was on student government at university, responsible for sports and games. So the story goes that there was one Sunday morning, there was an aerobics class scheduled, and this was a big class, so maybe 100 students in this class, and the instructor couldn't turn up. Last minute, she had to cancel. Obviously, the responsibility fell to me to find a replacement instructor. At that time on a Sunday morning, this is university students, so everybody out partying Saturday night. Nobody's available. I borrowed a Madonna Mega Mix CD from one of my buddies. Now, don't even ask me why he had that in his possession, but somehow he did. Right? I took this Madonna Mega Mix CD and I went up at the front of this class and started to teach what I remembered from the warm-ups at Universal. And when I thought that I had done everything I knew how to do, and I looked at my watch, I was 5 minutes into the class, and there was still 55 minutes left. So I started to do it again. People started walking out one by one, and I was like, you know what? This ain't to happen to me again. And so that was when I took my first certification. I did something called the RSA, the Royal Society of Arts Exercise and Music Certification, and subsequently coaching certification one after the other, all while I was pursuing my university degree in electrical engineering. And it became an additional source of income for me, actually, to get through Universal personal training and fitness classes and so on. When I came back to Barbados, and I soon built up a following with Maureen Surfley as my mentor, actually. And when I would come back home during my holidays, she would always have some space for me in the gym, whether it was just tidying up weights or whatever, and give me a little bit of pocket money. So when she thought about leaving the industry, she said she wanted to make sure that she was going to leave it with somebody who was going to take care of her members in a way that she felt comfortable with, and she approached me about taking it over. Now, I'm fresh out of university. I haven't come from a wealthy background. I didn't have any money. I went to the bank and I got the largest unsecured loan that I could get from them, and I basically signed the check over to Maureen. Improvements came by earning the money Monday to Friday and spending it on the weekends until we built things up, and that's really how we got started.
Tell me about those early days of being down when you took over that. Now and I remember that Maureen Surfleet was the originator with Surfside and so on. But now it's your gym,
right?
And
we were next to the beach, and we managed to do a lot of good work in that space. It was a space. I think the entire square footage of the space might have been just over 3,000 square feet, but we always incorporated the outside area. We worked on the outside, we used the beach, we used whatever we had, you know, and definitely it was not air conditioned. So at certain times of the day, and the funny thing about that story is that we had a relatively small group exercise studio, and it used to be hot at certain times of the day, and it had, you know, a low ceiling, and I convinced myself that if I took out the ceiling and raised the roof, things would be much cooler. But the ceiling tiles were providing the insulation, so it made it even hotter. But people would always leave the classes sweating and thinking they had a good workout when it was really just the sun beating on the roof and making the room real hot. But yeah, we managed to grow largely, I think, because one of the things that I've always been very aware of is that the industry was very new. Even to this day, it was very new. When you first started to ask me a question, I thought you were asking me about the fitness industry as a whole, because there was Arnold Schwarzenegger and the bodybuilding guys doing pumping iron. Then there was Jamie Lee Curtis and the whole kind of aerobic type with the leg warmers thing. And there were two very distinct factions at first. Women went over here and did aerobics, men went and lifted weights. We had a very strong emphasis on the education of our fitness professionals. Early on, I insisted on the highest level of certification for all my trainers in the industry, which is the American College of Sports Medicine Certified Personal Trainer certification. I now provide education for them myself. I'm exercise physiology certified. So that was the thing. I was writing articles in the newspaper. We were doing shows on TV. So we kind of established ourselves as, even though we weren't the biggest, fanciest gym, this was a gym where you could go and get expert instruction by people who knew what they were doing. And things have morphed and changed in the fitness industry considerably. I mean, to the point that we're not even registered with the Bodybuilding Federation anymore. So we don't have athletes who compete for bodybuilding. We don't have athletes who compete for powerlifting. I mean, we have the facility for it, but we've moved more towards a holistic approach to wellness and fitness.
And fitness. And of course you had the bar and that kind of stuff and so on too as well. Yeah.
Yes, and you know, everything has been about driving eyes to the primary brand, which is Surfside. You know, they say keep the main thing the main thing.
But now you have this lovely new facility up in Britain still. So tell me a little bit. I know that, as you mentioned, the transition was a difficult one in the sense that you're trying to maintain some semblance of the gym, but you're also setting up the new one, so you're straddling two locations. But you've got a great spot just behind the Lockerbie. So you go past Britain's Crossroad, and just past Lockerbie you make a right turn and so on. And there's this lovely facility in the back there with parking and so on. Tell me a little bit about that, George.
Yeah, we got super lucky with that space, Vic, because it was the 11th hour, honestly. The landlords in Wildy needed their space. They had a different kind of vision for what they wanted to do with the building. And time was, I would say time was running out for us as far as our membership and their patience. So what's happening? What's the next thing? We had a few failed attempts at new facilities. We had people we were speaking to, and when it was time to put some ink on paper, things fell through. And we actually had a member who came to me. He'd been a member with us for a very long time, and he said, George, I don't want you to lose what you've built over these years. I have a building. Come and have a look at the building and tell me what you think. I walked into the building, I had a look at it, and I was trying to kind of tamp down my enthusiasm so that the rent would be reasonable, you know. So I didn't want to seem too excited, but I walked through the building and I'm like, I think this could work. He said, here, and handed me the keys, and he was gone, and that was it. Because we had a relationship for a while, you know, and that was how it started. And we configured the building into a gym, obviously added locker rooms and showers and so on. But it feels like you're in an oasis in the middle of town.
That's it.
It feels like you come into the gate. There's lots of greenery, lots of windows looking out on. It feels like a healing space.
Tell us a little bit about life growing up. Obviously, you were good academically, and you lean towards the sciences and so on.
My childhood was typical of a West Indian man in a lot of ways, and in some ways atypical. So my father, I think that would be where I got my academics. My father came to University of the West Indies, and he was studying, and he was boarding in the neighborhood where my mother lived. So that's how they met. My father already had a family back in St. Kitts, so you know there's no father's name on my birth certificate. So and then he subsequently went back to St. Kitts. I think the first time I went to St. Kitts, I was 10 or 11 years old. It wasn't really well received by all of my siblings over there. A couple of them took me in and said, well, use family so we can take care of you. But yeah, that's kind of how it was for me. So there was only my mother doing the best she could for me. And it was only really when I got to secondary school that I could say I had that kind of strong male role model influences, because most of the men that was coming into your room shot with nobody that you want to be a mentor, if you understand me, Vic. To be honest with you, the men coming in at lunchtime and they get the food at lunchtime, but they're coming in after work and they're spending all the money per rum. And Friday night and Saturday they're spending even more money on rum, because that's when they just get paid, right? So there's nobody in the rum shop that is really any influence. So that whole thing about it takes a village, it really was a lot of the people in the neighborhood, primarily women who were running their own household, but always having an eye for the kids that were also in the neighborhood and making sure that they steered them in the right direction. Wherever they needed a little extra hand, they did that for them. And then around 12 or 13 years old, my mom and my now deceased stepfather, they married, and we kind of merged the families and moved to Scott Terrace. And moving to Scott Terrace was like a big thing. We were in a wall house now and so on. And life became a little easier then. But my formative years for sure it was a little tougher, but I never felt deprived. I never felt deprived because I always felt like there was love and attention around me. Well,
that's been a fascinating morning here chatting with George Griffith. I learned a lot from you about you this morning, that I knew something about you, but I didn't know, even though I've known you for all these years, I didn't know as much as I learned. So I want to thank you, George.
No, thank you for the opportunity, Vic. Nice seeing you again.
Good to see you.
Absolutely.